The autumn winds across Montana had no patience for the weak. By 1886, the gusts sweeping through Bridges Ford cut like blade edges, testing resolve. It was then that Evangeline arrived by stage, tall and unyielding, carrying barely any belongings but fierce determination. At the corral fence stood Marcus Hart, a rancher whose calloused hands bore witness to life's harshness. His young son, Thomas, not yet 10, gripped the rails, watching the stranger with wide eyes. Their encounter struck like metal meeting stone. Yet when two solitary souls collide on the frontier, sparks inevitably follow. As the stage rumbled away, Evangeline surveyed her new home. Bridges Ford was smaller than she'd imagined, scattered structures along a single main street, horses tethered to posts, and mountains looming darkly beyond. A voice called from the livery. Marcus emerged tall, powerfully built, the kind of presence that commanded every room. His sharp eyes and lined face told stories of severe winters and devastating losses. "Miss Evangeline," he said simply, introducing himself. He informed her she would stay with him and his household. This surprised her. She'd been promised lodging by the town committee and a teaching position. Marcus explained that the boarding house had burned the previous month. The committee had asked him to provide temporary shelter until spring. Clara bristled at the arrangement. Living under another man's roof was precisely what she'd escaped in St. Louis. She insisted on alternatives, but Thomas pointed out that the nearest town with available rooms was 3 days' hard ride away. Marcus's stern gaze silenced the boy, though pride flickered in his expression. This man wielded authority without cruelty, she realized. Taking a breath of the thin mountain air, Evangeline accepted the arrangement, though she insisted it would be temporary. Marcus's response left her wondering whether he meant weeks or something far longer. The wagon journey proceeded in near silence, broken only by creaking leather and grinding wheels against frozen ground. Evangeline gazed across endless grasslands stretching toward mountain peaks beautiful, but unforgiving. Thomas bounded ahead once they arrived, chattering excitedly about a colt. Despite herself, Evangeline smiled. Children had always been her weakness. In the modest guest room, Marcus laid out his expectations. His son rose at dawn, supper occurred at dusk, and they would each mind their own business. Evangeline straightened, refusing to be dictated to. She'd come to teach, not serve as a housekeeper. She would contribute fairly. Their eyes locked, hers ablaze with determination, his unmoved as stone. For the first time since his wife's passing, Marcus felt something shift beneath him, as if the wind had delivered this formidable woman directly into his life. The initial week proved that two strong personalities beneath one roof created considerable discord. Evangeline rose before dawn, preparing coffee and sweeping the kitchen without asking permission. She even mended a curtain damaged by the previous windstorm. Rather than appreciating her contributions, Marcus seemed irritated by them. "You don't require to do this," he told her one morning. "I'm not playing servant," she replied, tightening a knot in the curtain string. "I'm participating. That's what people do when they share a space." His jaw tightened, but he offered no further argument. Thomas shadowed Evangeline constantly, bombarding her with questions about city life, trains, and Latin. Evangeline answered patiently, earning laughter that Marcus heard from the barn, a sound absent for years. His son laughing without restraint. Something within Marcus's chest twisted sharply. Still, disagreements arose regularly. Evangeline insisted Thomas complete his lessons before ranch activities. Marcus believed practical work superseded books. Supper conversations grew tense until Mrs. Ortega, the ranch cook, muttered that the boy could manage both, telling Marcus to let Evangeline do her part. He fell silent afterward, though his eyes simmered when they met hers. One afternoon, Evangeline ventured to the corral where Thomas struggled with a spirited young horse. The boy pulled too harshly at the reins, and the animal reared dangerously. Evangeline's voice cut sharp, gently. "Horses learn through patience, not fear." She slipped through the rails, skirts sweeping dust, and placed her hand on the colt's neck, her touch firm yet gentle, her voice low and soothing. Within moments, the animal calmed. Thomas stared in amazement. "You're better with him than Pa." Watching from the fence line, Marcus's expression shifted with surprise. He'd anticipated a schoolteacher educated in letters, not a woman capable of gentling a barely broken horse. When Evangeline glanced up, their eyes locked, and the distance between them felt electrified. By the second week, Evangeline had transformed the spare room into something truly hers, books arranged carefully, pressed flowers displayed in a glass. Marcus noticed, pretending otherwise. The tension between them shifted, fewer outright arguments, more charged silences. One particularly windy evening, Evangeline stepped into the kitchen for water and discovered Marcus sitting at the table, a ledger open before him in lamplight. "You work too late," she said softly. He remained focused. "Cattle don't pause because a man is grieving." Something in his tone made her heart catch. Instead of inquiring about his wife, she poured him coffee and set it at his elbow, a small gesture, accepted with barely a nod. Thomas drew them together frequently. He insisted Evangeline join him during roping lessons and begged his father to listen during the stories she read aloud by the fire. One evening, Evangeline's voice carried the rhythm of a tale about knights and honor. Thomas drowsed against her shoulder, and Marcus stood in the doorway, observing his son peaceful, the room warm, a woman's voice softening the day's harsh edges. He turned away, disturbed by the heat rising in his chest. A storm descended from the mountains at dusk like an advancing army, black clouds split by jagged lightning, thunder cracking so violently it rattled the ranch house windows. Evangeline detested storms, always had. The sound transported her back to childhood, hiding beneath quilts while her father's voice thundered louder than the sky itself. She lit a lamp and sat rigidly in her narrow bed, listening to rain assault the roof. A violent crash caused her to flinch. A soft knock at her door startled her. Marcus's voice came through, quiet and steady. She called back, her reply betraying her anxiety. He entered wearing only shirt sleeves, lamplight catching his dark hair. Thomas was sleeping through the storm, he explained. Marcus pulled a chair close to her bed and sat a day. He spoke calmly about the storm being merely noise. Evangeline laughed weakly, pointing out that this noise shook the earth. He observed her thoughtfully, noting that she didn't strike him as someone easily frightened. She admitted that she wasn't, except when she was. The honesty surprised them both. He didn't tease as she half expected. Instead, he acknowledged that everyone feared something, even him. His admission piqued her curiosity. What could frighten a man who faced blizzards and wild animals without flinching? When he finally spoke, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper, losing Thomas. That was the sole thing that robbed him of sleep. The space between them shifted. Clara saw not merely the stern rancher but the human beneath the armor, haunted, vulnerable, fragile. Without conscious thought, she reached across the quilt and placed her hand over his. His palm was rough and weathered, yet warm. He stiffened momentarily, then exhaled as if something internal released. She assured him softly that he wouldn't lose Thomas. The boy was strong and had his father. Marcus examined their joined hands, then her face. Lightning flashed brilliantly, and she thought he might lean closer. Her heart thundered in her chest, but he didn't. He squeezed her fingers gently before standing. "Try to rest," he said. "The storm's nearly finished." She watched him depart, yet the impression of his hand remained on hers like a brand. Dawn brought clear skies and air purified by the storm. Evangeline found Thomas already outside, pursuing a chicken. Marcus saddled his horse nearby, glancing up as she emerged onto the porch. He asked if she'd managed any sleep. She said a little, then added that she owed that partly to him. Something flickered in his expression. He looked away, tightening the saddle strap. While Marcus attended to the fence line, Evangeline guided Thomas through his lessons. The boy struggled with arithmetic until she explained numbers in terms of livestock. Thomas's grin shone like sunshine as he proudly calculated answers. Marcus returned in time to witness them bent together over their work, and something within him cracked further open. His boy laughing, this woman patient and steady, a household that felt less hollow. That evening, when Thomas begged for another story, Marcus didn't remain in the doorway. He entered, settled into his late wife's chair by the fire, and listened, his attention focused primarily on Evangeline rather than the book. Neither mentioned it, yet both understood that the barriers between them were eroding. The warning arrived in written form. Evangeline discovered a letter slipped beneath her slate at the schoolhouse one afternoon. No address, no signature, only her name in harsh black letters. You can't run from blood, Evangeline. Your father's debts remain mine to collect. Her stomach plummeted. In St. Louis, she'd abandoned a father who'd gambled away his fortune and fallen under the control of ruthless men who'd made abundantly clear that she represented payment for his obligations. She'd believed Montana sufficiently distant to escape that past. Now she understood her error. That evening at supper, Marcus detected her distraction. She deflected his inquiry, but he remained unconvinced. His gaze sharpened, and she felt his observation linger long after the dishes were cleared. 2 evenings later, her past manifested in flesh and blood. Marcus had just banked the fire when Thomas rushed through the door, breathless, announcing riders in the yard. Marcus rose immediately, retrieving his gun. Evangeline froze as the door swung open and 2 strangers entered as though they owned the property. They wore dust-covered coats and carried eyes mean as serpents. Well now, the taller one drawled, Miss Evangeline, just as your father promised. Marcus shifted, positioning himself protectively between Evangeline and these intruders. Who precisely are you? Name's Sterling, the man replied with a grin devoid of warmth. Your house guest owes us. Her father's debts are ours now, and she's our settlement. Evangeline's throat constricted as she whispered a denial. But Marcus understood immediately. The pieces aligned why she'd reacted so dramatically to the storm, her guarded silences, her evasiveness. He leveled his revolver, voice cold as a church bell. You're leaving now. Sterling chuckled, though perspiration beaded his temple. You think you can protect her? We'll return. Next time, we might take the boy instead. Thomas gasped. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. Evangeline stepped forward, her voice trembling but fierce. Don't you dare threaten him. If it's me you want, then leave now. Marcus's voice cracked like a whip, his eyes blazing with something Evangeline had never witnessed before, pure, protective rage. You are not leaving with them. Not tonight. Not ever. The standoff stretched taut as wire. Eventually, Sterling spat on the floor and gestured toward the door. This isn't finished. When the hoofbeats finally faded into darkness, Evangeline realized she was shaking. Thomas clung to her skirts, his small body trembling. Marcus holstered his weapon and turned on her with intensity. Explain. Now. Tears stung her eyes as she recounted everything: her father's gambling addiction, his losses, the creditors who demanded her as compensation. She'd fled before they could collect. Marcus's jaw clenched. He asked why she hadn't told him. I thought I'd left it behind, she whispered. I didn't want to drag your family into my shame. Marcus closed the distance in 2 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders firmly. He told her that shame belonged to men like Sterling, not to her. She wasn't payment or property. His voice burned with conviction. Her breath caught at the intensity in his words. No one had ever defended her with such ferocity. Thomas sniffled, still gripping her hand, asking if they'd return. Marcus looked at his son, then back at Evangeline. His decision crystallized before them all. Let them come back, because this family doesn't run. Not from storms, not from debts, not from men like that. Evangeline's knees nearly gave way at his use of the word family. In that moment, beneath fear and fury, something truer than either dared admit finally broke through. That night, Evangeline stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself. She whispered that she should leave if they returned, they'd destroy everything he'd constructed. Marcus moved beside her. He asked if she thought him afraid of men like Sterling. She replied that she believed he'd already endured too much loss. His late wife. He couldn't risk his son for her. For a long moment, he remained silent, jaw working. Then he turned her gently to face him. He told her she didn't comprehend she wasn't a burden they tolerated. She was the reason the house felt alive again. Thomas smiled because of her. He breathed easier because of her. He couldn't envision a life that didn't end with her in it. Her breath caught. Words tumbled out before she could restrain them. I love you, too. I was terrified, but I can't imagine leaving. Not you, not Thomas. For the first time in years, Marcus' heart permitted himself to hope. He drew her close, kissing her with hunger born of countless nights without her. She melted against him, their chaotic world narrowing to a single heartbeat. 2 days later, Sterling swaggered into Bridger's Ford determined to collect. He discovered more than he anticipated. Marcus stood tall outside the general store, Evangeline beside him, Thomas clutching her hand. Half the town gathered, buzzing with whispers. Sterling sneered and demanded Marcus hand her over. Marcus's voice carried like thunder across the crowd. He refused. Sterling came for her. He came through Marcus and through every man present who distinguished justice from thievery. Murmurs rose, hardening into unified agreement. Sheriff Tully stepped forward, hand resting on his revolver. He informed Sterling that his welcome had expired. Leave now or face hanging for attempted kidnapping. The outlaw cursed, but the numbers opposed him. He spat, mounted his horse, and rode hard from town. The cheer that erupted swelled like a tide. Evangeline's eyes blurred with tears. Marcus caught her hand and, before God and half the assembled town, dropped to one knee. Evangeline, he said, his voice thick with emotion, marry me. Let's unite our names and raise this boy and any others God provides. Be my partner in all things. Her answer came through laughter and tears together. Yes, Marcus. 1,000 times yes. The crowd erupted in celebration. Thomas whooped with delight. For the first time in her life, Evangeline felt she truly belonged. The Methodist church bell rang clearly on that spring morning, its sound rolling across Bridger's Ford. Folks arrived by wagon, on horseback, on foot from miles distant. They gathered for evidence that even in a landscape as harsh as Montana, love could flourish and survive. Evangeline smoothed the skirt of her borrowed ivory gown, her hands trembling only slightly. Mrs. Ortega had insisted on sewing lace trim, muttering that no bride of the rocking age should walk plain. Thomas tugged her hand, his eyes bright as sunlight. You really mean it? You're staying forever? She knelt and pressed a kiss to his forehead. Forever, Thomas. You and your father are my home now. When the sanctuary doors opened, silence fell. Marcus waited at the front, dressed in his finest black coat, hat in hand. His eyes met hers, steady and warm, and for the first time since fleeing St. Louis, Evangeline felt the ground beneath her feet was secure. The preacher spoke of covenants, of storms endured and burdens distributed. Marcus held her hands, his voice low but certain. He'd once believed his heart rested buried with his first wife, but God had proven him mistaken. Evangeline had brought laughter back to his son, light back to his house, and peace to his spirit. He vowed to honor her, cherish her, and never again walk alone. Tears escaped despite her efforts. She told him she'd never believed she'd find genuine belonging. But with him and Thomas, she was no longer fleeing. She vowed to stand beside him, to teach, to nurture, and to love him for the remainder of her life. The preacher smiled broadly and pronounced them husband and wife. The kiss that followed was met with thunderous applause. That evening, tables overflowed with food, and the town danced beneath strung lanterns. Thomas darted between couples, displaying steps Mrs. Ortega had taught him, laughing until his ribs ached. Marcus drew Evangeline close, their movements slow, their foreheads brushing in peaceful joy. Above them, the Montana stars burned sharp and eternal. The land remained harsh, the winters still cruel, but they would face it as one. Rancher, teacher, and boy, bound not by blood but by love that had proven stronger than fear, debt, or grief.